So this is going to be a video about cameras. I know this isn't exactly like the regular content around here, but it's something really dear to my heart. And the previous video about my little Fuji over there and the video over there seemed to resonate with quite a lot of people. So I feel like I have something to share in this regard now. So a few months back, I bought this little camera, this absolute beauty, the Lumix GM1. And you know, if you watched the video about my Fuji, you know that I absolutely adore that camera, and it made me incredibly happy to have, and it shot so many amazing pictures that represent so many dear memories to me. But ever since I bought this little camera, I find that this has been taking most of my pictures instead of the Fuji. And I spent some time kind of like wondering how I got here and what this means for my photography going forward, and I have some thoughts to share. When I bought this Fuji, kind of the rationale was that I don't want like a big heavy camera because I want to be able to carry it around, right? And the Fuji weighs, I think, 490 with a battery, with a SD card, without a lens. It gets grams, so about like half a kilo. And then, you know, with the smaller lens on it, you can get to like 700 grams or so, which is fairly light. Most full frame bodies are heavier than that without a lens attached, right? So it's a fairly light camera. However, I still found that it was a bit too heavy to take around, and I found myself like more often than not taking it with me because it's too big, or it needs like an extra bag. It cannot, you know, it was just a bit too big to take around. So a natural question to arise is, why would you want to take a camera around all the time in the first place, right? So to answer this and kind of all the other questions, I want to structure this video as 3 pieces. So first, we're going to talk about why you should kind of have an EDC camera, why you should carry a camera every day. The second is going to be like why this camera specifically, and then because I got a focal length on it that I don't usually use or like, so I want to spend a bit of time on why I picked the 28mm full frame equivalent focal length for my EDC. Why you should carry a camera every day. So there is the old adage about like the best camera there is the one that you have on yourself, you know, that you just don't need to get the shot, and if the shot is good enough, then it won't matter what camera it was shot on, which is, you know, certainly true, but for me it came from a different direction. For me, the idea behind everyday carrying, like EDCing a camera, came from the joy of looking back the mundane pictures that my grandparents had. They have photos that are 50 years old, which are just like completely mundane moments in the everyday life, but purely because of the fact that, you know, it's basically like a little time capsule, they just take on like a value and like a life of their own. And I find it very important for myself to have these small little snapshots of everyday life. And I found that the Fuji being a little bit big, I only took it to like these big events. You know, I have a bunch of amazing pictures from my grandpa's birthday last year, but I found that the next set of that is August 22nd. And then I found that the next big batch of pictures I have are from December, from the trip to the family around Christmas. And then in between, I took it out a few times for a few photo walks, but I don't have like a whole lot of pictures in between. And yes, of course, it's nice to have these like highlight reels of pictures and the image quality and everything. I love it. But I felt like I was missing shots of the mundane. So, you know, 20 years from now, we are likely not gonna be living in this like 21 square meter apartment, right? So all the little shots I have of like, you know, a pretty flower arrangement, or the cute little plants in the background here, or any of those things, or, you know, a pretty sunrise from our window, all of these are going to become very dear memories. And I just didn't have any of these. So I found that the best way for me to actually make sure that I capture and record all of these precious moments and places and people in my life is just like have a camera on me at all times. Now, stage 2. Why this camera? Why the Lumix GM1? The first question I think we should be talking about is, why not just your phone? Right, because, you know, the phone has a camera or 2 or 3, depending on what phone you have, of course, and it's always on you and it's there anyway, so why not just use that, right? Why burn a substantial amount of cash on a technically redundant device? So I think for a lot of people, it actually could be your phone. right? There is absolutely no problem with that. For me, there are just like two things that I don't really like about using your phone as kind of an EDC camera. No matter how nice a phone camera is, I just never like the way it looks. And I was daily driving an iPhone 11 for the last 3 years, and then recently I upgraded to, what's this, an iPhone 16, and you know, this has a nice camera, and I still just like, I just don't really like how like the processing looks. Somehow it just never feels authentic to me. And this is a personal quirk, I know. I've seen pictures that are taken with iPhones which look absolutely beautiful. I just somehow never really clicked with how it looks. So for me, that was a big turn off from using the phone as an EDC camera, right? I'm shooting these pictures for me. If I don't like how it looks, I'm not gonna do it, right? Simple as that. The second thing I don't really like about using your phone as an EDC camera is how it encourages you to use it, right? In a certain way, your phone is like always there, but because of that, it's never really there. It being this everything device just removes so much of that intentionality from using it. You know, you will just pull it up to take a picture. Oh, there is a notification and you're out of the moment. And I just found that it wasn't a nice experience for me. And then of course, like getting the phone off and, you know, iPhone, it goes into Apple Photos and then you have to export it. And like, I just never really clicked with it. I just didn't really like how it incentivized me to use it as a camera. The exact polar opposite of that is kind of what a separate dedicated device encourages you to do, because this little guy sends no notifications. It technically has Wi-Fi built in, but I never used it. I just open up little battery door, pull the SD card, chuck it into the MacBook, and then just go from there. And I found that the dedicated device just adds an extra layer of like intentionality to how I use it. And this, combined with the image quality, which is much, much nicer in my opinion, is just something that I'm very happy to pay for. At this point, it turned into a bit of a ritual that every week I have like a weekly review when I sit down and look over my notebook and like, you know, all the stuff, like do some like housekeeping mentally and from a calendar perspective. And part of that ritual is just pulling the SD card and uploading all the files to Lightroom. And sometimes I sort them immediately, sometimes they just go into a backlog, but it's just part of the experience. It's a bit of a ritual, which I've just grown to really enjoy. Okay, so now we established that you want to be carrying a camera every day and you don't want it to be your phone. So what camera should it be? Now, I think the absolute king of EDC cameras has to be the Ricoh GR3. So the Ricoh is an amazing camera, but it has like two main problems for me at least. Number one is that it's really expensive. It's like more than 1,000 euros where I live, and it's just a lot of money for a camera. The second problem I had is like the dust issue. And I know everyone's like, oh yeah, but the dust issue is overblown, blah, blah, blah. But like the fact that most people just recommend carrying the Ricoh in its own little sterile pouch because you cannot just like, you know, remove the lens and clean the sensor, to me is a big turnoff. Because for me, the whole idea, like this little guy takes beatings, you know? Like the screen is a tiny bit loose. I bought it secondhand, of course, but you know, I'm not worried about this guy. I don't have to baby this camera. It's like a tiny little magnesium brick which goes into any pocket, any bag, without much regard for it. And for me, that's very important in an EDC camera, right? I don't want to worry about the device I'm using. So this camera being about half the price of the Ricoh and just like a much more robust device was a very, very big upside for me. So if you don't want to go Ricoh, then your option becomes basically Micro Four Thirds. And there are a lot of very good Micro Four Thirds cameras. You can kind of fish around in what are the features that are essential for you. You know, if you really like a flip screen, then you can go for like a G80, I guess, or GX80, I think, like that's the nomenclature, which is just like a little bit bigger than this, but it has the flippy screen. If you like a viewfinder, you can try to find the GM5. Good luck, it's basically impossible to buy nowadays. So the Micro Four Thirds universe has a lot of opportunities for you. And when I was researching, I quickly found out that the GM1, this little guy, is officially the smallest Micro Four Thirds camera ever made, and like the smallest interchangeable lens camera ever made. There is some debate about like the Pentax Q1, I guess, but you know, Micro Four Thirds, this is like the smallest camera you can buy. You know, as a kind of a comparison, like this guy is tiny. It's really, really small. At a certain point, I was just like, okay, you know, I have a camera for features, right? My Fuji can do most of the things that I would want a camera to do. So for this EDC camera, I don't want features. And I decided that I'm going to stop kind of like feature laddering myself. It's like, okay, you know, but oh, flippy screen, that would be kind of nice. Or oh, maybe a mic inputs in case I want to do a video. That I was like, no, 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 let's just stop that. I want this to take pictures of my everyday life. So I just want something small. And then this is the smallest thing that you can buy. So I bought this. So now we know why I started to carry a camera every day and why it turned into the GM1, the camera of choice. Why 28 millimeters for full frame equivalent focal length? So there are kind of two main reasons for this. And the first thing is that I wanted the, you know, smallest package that you can buy, and the smallest autofocus lens that you can buy is this little beauty, the 14 millimeter 2.5. And this is the smallest autofocus lens for Micro Four Thirds, perhaps for any kind of system. So it's just, you know, it was a pretty natural choice. However, I am a really, really big 40 millimeter enjoyer. I just find that the 40 mil full frame equivalent, of course, focal length is just something that I find very aesthetically pleasing. And it's like just compressed enough that it doesn't feel like this goofy wide, but it's not as constrained and restrictive as like even longer, like a 50 or an 85 would be. So I really like my 40 mils, but I had to find over time that 40 mils, and I learned it with the Fuji mostly, is that 40 mils for like an everyday situation is a bit too tight for you to really stay immersed in the action, and to stay immersed in what you're doing. And, you know, if the purpose of this camera to capture the mundane and the everyday in my life, you know, I don't want to take 3 steps back to be able to take a picture of a table with my friends in it. It's just not something that, it doesn't serve the purpose, right? And on my Fuji, you know, the 45mm equivalent Sigma lens, it basically just lives on there all the time because I love the focal length. But for the everyday carry, I wanted to opt for something wider, so I can stay more involved in what I'm doing and at the same time kind of capture more of moments, right? Because that's basically what a wider focal length does. It kind of like, it captures a bit more of the world for you per photo. And I found that this combination is just really good for the purpose that I'm buying this camera for. So yeah, I think this kind of rounds out the story of how and why I bought this little beauty of a camera. I hope that it inspired you to carry a camera and to take some pictures of your mundane everyday life, because now you're used to it, but in 20 years you're gonna be very glad that you took all those pictures. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.